How far is it possible to progress with oils within just 1 year? A year ago, I hit a wall with acrylics. After working with them for years, I realized that all my favorite paintings are actually in oils, and I would never achieve the look I wanted with just acrylics alone. There's just something about these oil paintings that I love. They're just so dreamy, and those buttery smooth brushstrokes was everything I wanted. So I decided to make the switch to oils, and 365 days later, my paintings now look like this. And I have never looked back to acrylics. So here's my journey from day 1 to now, and how I learnt to paint with oils. So let me take you back. On the very first day, I started with a paint coach tutorial, because I mean, who doesn't start with a paint coach video? He basically guides you through this painting demo, which was a super helpful start. And I suppose that this painting looks exactly how you'd imagine your first ever oil painting would look. Kind of underwhelming. But I suppose the only way is up, so I decided to do a portrait next because I already hated doing still life. And this is where I'm so glad that I documented this whole process, because rewatching this footage, I can see so clearly everything that I am doing wrong. The 3 main problems that you can see in these clips is 1, my paintbrushes are way too small, 2, I'm not using enough paint, and 3, I'm not working on the right surface. Combine all of these and you have a pretty mid-looking painting. And this is what frustrated me in the beginning, because I didn't know what the problem was. I couldn't understand why these master painters that I look up to, their paintings look so smooth and effortless, but mine just looked kind of like an acrylic painting still. So one really easy change to make straight off the bat would be to just use bigger brushes. You want the size of the brush to be a good match to the space that you're trying to fill. So me trying to paint this whole cheek with like a tiny little brush, stupid. Not only does it waste time, it just doesn't look good. All of those problems I listed before, they all stem from being nervous and too tentative, which is obviously understandable when you're first learning how to paint, but I wish I could go back and just tell myself sooner, stop painting the lines, you know, stop being so careful and tentative with these teeny tiny little brush strokes, because it's not going to create the painting that you want. All of the stuff that I mentioned is just pointers that push me in the right direction, creating paintings that I am now proud of. But there's something that I do like to keep in mind, and it's something that Sargent said. He said, there are many roads to Rome, and what he meant by this is that his way is not the only way to create a great painting. There are so many different methods and techniques to create a really brilliant painting, so just keep in mind that you are free to just find what you like. You know, I'm not saying this is law, this is an absolute, you have to do it this way. This is just the way that I think really helped me, and that maybe you could try. And as for the third problem that I spoke on, I mentioned this in my last video. I did all of these first paintings on canvas paper. Get rid of it. Get it gone. I mean, you know my feelings from the last video. I hate the stuff. And not to be one of those people who blames their materials, but genuinely, I think it held me back. I would definitely recommend canvas board over canvas paper, and if you have the money, then gesso board. And in the learning stages, when you're going to be making like lots of really crappy paintings, you know, you don't need to be keeping them all. So what I do is I often keep a couple of gesso boards as like practice pages, and I will just keep repainting them. So I will paint it and then I will either wipe it off while the paint is wet, or I will sand it down and paint over it like that, because I understand that, you know, these surfaces are expensive and, you know, you want to be able to reuse them. You know, the most frustrating thing for me about learning to oil paint, it was never even knowing if you're even on track. You know, you watch some random YouTube tutorials and kind of try and piece together all the information, but even with that, I still kind of struggled. Which is exactly why I created my Patreon. I want you to actually be able to see the progress and how I'm doing it. I put all of the knowledge that has helped me get to this point on my Patreon, and these are pretty long videos as well. I struggle to fit everything into a short YouTube video, but on the Patreon you will get like 40-50 minute painting demonstrations, as well as like shorter tutorials. For the price of basically a coffee every month, you get access to not only all the previous videos I've posted on there, but an additional 1 to 2 exclusive videos each month. And that number is probably a bit higher. I did post 3 last month. It's 1 to 2 minimum, and then, you know, however many more I decide to post. You get to see actual work in progress shots and just thoughts about my process. You get to see, you know, behind the scenes and step-by-step images of how I build up a painting, plus access to my community. So if you want feedback on a piece of artwork, you think there's something not quite right about it, but you're not too sure what it is, you can just put it straight into my community tab, and you will not only have me who's able to comment, but also every other artist on there. So it's a great way to get feedback and just helpful advice. It could help you to reach the point that you want to get to with your oil journey. So if you are interested and you'd like to join, then I will put the link down in the description. I feel like after those first 30 days, I did start to plateau a bit, and I found it strange because I would make a painting that was worse than the last, and I'm like, how is that even possible? Progress is not always going to be linear, and my life was pretty turbulent around that era. I was making some huge life decisions like dropping out of university, and I wonder if that fear and uncertainty was showing in the paintings. I think that's definitely something that can happen where your emotions actually affect the work that you create. And there's probably going to be times where you make a bad painting after bad painting, but you've just got to keep going with it because that is the only way to get better. But there was a moment within this year that I feel like I made considerable progress in a very short space of time, and that was after doing one very specific thing, and that is master copies. I feel like I used to not have a good appreciation for how truly helpful master copies can be. I suppose we've always been told that copying someone else's work is inherently a bad thing, and all I wanted to do was be able to create my own good original artwork. But to be able to reach that point, I feel like I first needed to study the artists that came before me. You learn so much more from doing a master copy than just painting a regular photo, because this artist that you are studying from, they've already got it all figured out. You're studying the brushstrokes they made, you're studying their colour choices. You're not just trying to figure everything out from a photo or some other image, and instead you're gaining the wisdom of centuries worth of artists, because you best believe that this artist that you're copying probably copied from other artists before them. Like, why try and reinvent the wheel when a lot of stuff has already been figured out? To me, master copies almost feel like one of those paint by numbers things. It's like a helping hand through how to create a painting until you're feeling confident enough to go off and, paint from a photo instead of a painting. Sargent is a renowned painter that I and many others look up to, so he was my first choice when it came to who am I going to kind of emulate and who am I going to learn off. My first studies of his weren't great, but they were definitely a step in the right direction. And after doing a couple of copies of his, I ended up going it alone and doing this painting that I'm still so proud of to this day. The one of the Lady Morgana from BBC's Merlin. I truly don't think that that painting would have turned out as good as it did without those prior Sargent copies that I did. And it gave me the confidence to have these thicker, looser brushstrokes when I painted Morgana. Now, I know it's not perfect, and I look back at it and I know that there are things I could do better, but that is all just part of learning, isn't it? But it seemed like that confidence was all I needed, and I felt like I was on a roll after that. Each painting I was really happy with, and I started pushing the boundaries a bit more, started, getting a bit creative with getting my own references and making up my own scenes. And throughout this year, my painting style has dramatically changed. At the very beginning, I was one of those people who draws out my image first, and then I would transfer it to my canvas, and then I would be really careful to stay within the lines because I was absolutely terrified of losing that initial sketch. But now I take a lot more of a free approach, and which has made me actually enjoy painting a lot more. I basically don't start with any sketch and I go straight in with paint. And I feel like this has just really helped me to create these looser paintings that I really wanted to achieve, and it has just made the painting process a lot more enjoyable. It's a lot less stressful when I'm painting, thinking, oh no, what happens when I lose this drawing? Because I know I will always find the drawing, because the whole painting process for me now is trying to carve out the features of a face bit by bit, rather than starting off with this flawless outline and then basically just colouring it in. So yeah, that is something that I've really noticed changing about myself as an artist, and something that I'm really glad it has changed. But you know, you've come here wanting to know, how do you start to learn to oil paint, and probably want to know what resources I was using. Well, first of all, I'm quite the collector of books. I got quite a lot of art books in this time, whether that be just like picture books of my favourite artists, or more like descriptive and tutorial style books. If you're someone who struggles with colour, I got this colour theory book, really great, I would recommend. I also got this other book at the very start of my oil painting journey, which is like a portraiture book. This wasn't as helpful for me, I don't think, because I did paint for a while with acrylics, so this was just a lot of the fundamentals that I already had a somewhat grasp of, but I definitely did still learn from this book. So if you are starting from the very beginning and you've never painted before, I would definitely also recommend this book. As for other ways that I learned, I didn't really take any proper classes or anything, but something that I do is I'm on a lot of other artists' Patreon pages. I just love seeing how other artists approach their paintings and their own process. And then the final way that I've been learning, this was a one-off. I did buy a course on PaintTube, and it was by the artist Zhaoming Wu. So this was like a full, I think it was like 6-hour painting demonstration, and yes, that was more expensive than, say, you know, watching free YouTube videos, but I do feel like I got a lot from that. But yeah, if you can find like a painting class near you, that is obviously ideal, that would be amazing. I would absolutely love to at some point have some formal training and, you know, going to one of these studios for like a month or something, or even trying out something like a live painting class. I suppose the thing about oil painting, or learning any skill really, is how much of your life are you willing to dedicate to make this happen? The only difference between you and reaching your full potential is consistency. Oil painting can be hard and confusing, but you really just have to stick with it, and at some point it will just click for you, whether that moment be, you know, doing master copies like it was for me, or doing something else like plein air painting. So do I have any words of wisdom for oil painting after this year of learning? Probably the one thing would be, the only way to grow is to push yourself to do things that you're not even sure you're capable of. If you're forever painting within your supposed limits, then how are you ever going to know if you can push those limits and those boundaries and get better? Don't think you can paint a portrait? Paint one anyway. And as cringy as it sounds, it really is true that you learn a lot more from your failures than your successes. And that's about it. Remember, if you want to see some behind the scenes of how I approach my paintings, then you can go to my Patreon, and all of the exclusive stuff is over there. If you've enjoyed this video, then I think you'll like this other video, the one where I try and learn how to paint like Sargent. This was the turning point for me when I really figured out how to use oils, so I would definitely give that one a watch next.